Hello and welcome students for the third lecture of Good Automated Laboratory Practices. In previous lecture, we had discussion about what is LIMS, that is Laboratory Information System. Also, there was a discussion that what is the importance of this particular guideline, Good Automated Laboratory Practice. Mainly, we are supposed to follow these guidelines in order to maintain the integrity, or you can say in order to assure the integrity of experimental data. In second lecture, there was a discussion about the role and the formation of quality assurance unit. There was a discussion about different functions of quality assurance unit. Also, we had discussed how to secure data into LIMS. So for that, a separate guideline has been given. And also there was a discussion about LIMS raw data. Now, what is LIMS raw data? So these data are completely unprocessed and they are directly fed into LIMS just after completing experiment. So there was no further processing of data has been done. So this is called LIMS raw data. Now in today's lecture, I am going to discuss about the guidelines related to the software. Now in any computer system, the most important part of that particular system is software. Today we have hundreds and thousands of softwares which are doing some very complex calculations and performing very complex functions for us. Similarly, when we are talking about LIMS, that is Laboratory Information Management System, here also the software plays very important role. Suppose you are not selecting proper software, then your LIMS will not perform as per the expectation. So it is very crucial and very important to select a proper software. Now, the agencies like EPA or US FDA has mentioned or has given some guidelines for the purchase of software. They have also prepared a list of approved contractors, agents, or you can say software manufacturing companies in order to purchase a good quality software for LIMS, that is Laboratory Information Management System. Now in detail, when we see these guidelines, so as you can see that software is used to collect, analyze, process or maintain LIMS raw data. So this is the very basic function of LIMS software, that you can use it to collect, analyze, process and maintain LIMS raw data. Who will purchase the software for LIMS? So it is a job of laboratory management. And from where he will purchase? So a list of contractors which are approved by EPA, that is Environmental Protection Agency, or USFDA. These are authorized person to purchase LIMS software. But during the purchase of software, the laboratory management has to ensure that they will develop methodologies on how to operate this software, and these methodologies are mainly made based on the size and nature of software being developed. So only the laboratory management system is responsible for the selection of proper software, and during the selection of software they have to understand that what is the size and what is the nature of software. The next point says that testing and quality assurance methods to ensure that all LIMS software accurately performs. Now, when we are buying a particular software, even though we are buying them from approved company or you can say approved vendors, it is our initial job to backtest the purchased software. In this particular operation, what we are trying to do, we are trying to check whether the software is performing all intended functions properly or not. You can also say that this is a kind of validation for the software which we have purchased to operate LIMS. During this validation, we have to work on acceptance criteria, test to be used, person responsible for conducting the test, documentation of test result, and test review and approval. So throughout the validation, we have to prepare a proper document that who is the person doing this kind of validation, what are the findings of validation, and whether the software is performing properly or not. So all this information we have to document, and on successful validation of software, the person who is conducting validation will give the final approval for the use of LIMS software. Change control methods that include instructions for requesting, testing, approving, documenting, and implementing changes. Now first you have to understand what is change control methods. So change control is a systematic step-by-step process to bring change into already approved standard operating procedures. Here in this context, we are buying a software from external vendor. Now after buying, if there is a need to make certain change, if we want to tailor made that particular software in order to suit with our LIMS system. So for this kind of change control, we have to develop proper method. We have to first establish that what is the need for such change. Then we have to request a proper person to carry out this change control. After change control, again there will be a validation and approval. Also we have to maintain proper documentation of this entire change control method development. When indicated, change control methods shall also include reporting and evaluating problems as well as implementing corrective action. Now during the development of this change control method, there is a possibility that the operator may face some issues, operating issues, or you can say technical issues. So whatever problem that person is facing, it should be documented properly. Also, what are the solutions or how he is dealing with this kind of problems also be documented properly for the future references. The last point says that maintain a historical file of software, software operating procedure, that is manuals, software changes, and software version numbers. So whenever we are changing any particular function of software, it is compulsory to maintain historical file of software, which is the original file of software, software operating procedure, which is a manual or you can say the standard operating procedure, what kind of changes you are making, and also we have to preserve the original number of software. Now this particular guideline deals with the documentation, that what is the essential documentation or what is the necessary documentation that we have to store and we have to maintain pertaining to the software used in the LIMS. So a description of the software and functional requirements, listing of all algorithms and formulas and they occur, testing and quality assurance, installation and operation, maintenance, enhancement and retirement. So these are different headings. Okay, so whenever a quality assurance unit is visiting LIMS department, they may ask you to give a documented proof of the software which you are using to operate LIMS. So even though we have that software in computer, separately we have to maintain a document which shows the functions of particular software, what kind of algorithms are used by the software, what kind of formulas the given software is using, what is the testing frequency. Likewise, a detailed information should be documented. The next point says that For new LIMS development or modification of existing LIMS, documentation shall cover all phases of generic software life cycle. Now, sometimes what happens that when we try to upgrade the LIMS system, or suppose a particular LIMS system is not working and we want to transfer software to the other LIMS system, that kind of activity are also meant to be documented properly, right? One version of LIMS software, when we are using on other system, we have to maintain a proper documentation that what was the need for doing such activity and what kind of changes we are seeing when we are using this software into other LIMS system. The EPA laboratories and those of its agents shall comply with the documentation requirement specified in EPA Information Resource Management Policy Manual. Now, the Environmental Protection Agency is also maintaining a proper manual. These manuals are nothing but rules and regulations for authorized agents and vendors. So these authorized agents and vendors are also supposed to maintain proper documentation pertaining to the software which they are selling to different agencies. All documentation is readily available. We have to make sure that all documentation is readily available in the facility where the software is used. For example, you are working in a particular laboratory. So when you are working in a particular laboratory, you must ensure that all documents pertaining to the LIMS software is readily available. You cannot say that this facility does not have any document. Our documentations are stored in head office or at some other location. Please remember that wherever you are using LIMS software, the documentation pertaining to the LIMS and software should be readily available, should be within that particular premises. SOPs are also readily available, right? So this is a very basic need from any quality assurance department. A historical file of software and documentation are retained. Even though you are not using a particular software at a given point of time, you were using that particular software in past, but still you are supposed to maintain the documentation, or you can say a historical documentation, a historical file you have to retain, and you have to store that particular data properly. So that was all about the software. Software is very important part of LIMS, and when we are using software, we have to ensure that the software is authentic and we are purchasing them from approved vendors only. Similarly, hardware is also playing very important role in LIMS. So what kind of guidelines are given in relation to the hardware of LIMS system? So when LIMS raw data are collected, analyzed, processed or maintained, laboratory management shall ensure that LIMS hardware and communication components are maintained properly. So again, even if you are buying a good quality software, but suppose you are not paying enough attention to the hardware component of LIMS, there is a risk of compromising with the integrity of data, or you will get less efficiency from your LIMS system. So make sure that along with the software you are paying enough attention to the different components which comprises the hardware of LIMS. Now laboratory management should ensure adequate design and capacity, and a description is documented and maintained. See, when we are buying a particular hardware, we have to follow strict rules and regulations given by agencies, right? Our hardware should match with the design and capacity given by the agency. In our case, it would be EPA, Environmental Protection Agency, or USFDA. Also, the documentation, whenever you are buying any hardware, please maintain documents properly because it is mandatory. Then, Hardware must be installed and operated in accordance with manufacturer's recommendation, and at installation undergo acceptance testing that confirms the acceptance criteria. You have no authority to select the installation method for the purchased hardware. Here in this guideline, you have been instructed very strictly that whatever guidelines are given by the manufacturer, we are supposed to follow that guidelines. If we want that particular hardware to work properly, work efficiently, then please make sure that you are following all rules and regulations pertaining to installation given by manufacturer. Also, after the installation, we have to validate that particular hardware, and after validation we have to check what is the acceptance criteria, what is the standard deviation we are getting in terms of experimental data. Next point is that the standard operating procedures shall be established and maintained to define the acceptance criteria, testing, documentation and approval required for changes to LIMS hardware and communication component. Whenever we are doing anything, we have to develop a standard operating procedure, so that same logic we can apply to the use of hardware, that there should be a clear cut standard operating procedure. How you are testing your hardware, that you have to document. And suppose you want to make some changes, remember that change control. Suppose you find that your hardware is not working properly and there is an urgent need to make some changes, then you are supposed to follow a proper procedure. Whatever changes you are making, it should be documented properly, and you must have authorization to make those changes, and post changes you have to get approval. Next point says that adequately tested, inspected and maintained hardware should be used. So it is a responsibility of laboratory management that they have to test hardware adequately, they have to inspect hardware for any damage, and the proper maintenance of any hardware component should be carried out by laboratory management. Standard operating procedures for and documentation of these routine operations shall be maintained. So even if you are doing maintenance activity, standard operating procedures are there, and you have to maintain proper documentation of each and every maintenance activity. Documentation of non-routine maintenance shall also include a description of the problem. This is in case of any accidental incident or any accidental situation where you have to carry out a non-planned maintenance. It was not scheduled, but suddenly there is a situation and now you have to undergo some kind of maintenance. The hardware system has to undergo some kind of maintenance. So proper documentation is needed. The corrective action, acceptance testing criteria and the acceptance testing performed to ensure that the LIMS hardware and communication components have been adequately repaired. Before maintenance, there is a validation. After maintenance, there is a validation. In that validation, you have to check whether the maintenance has been done properly. After that, you have to carry out the acceptance criteria testing, and once you find that now the hardware is complying with the acceptance criteria testing results, then only you should approve the use of that particular hardware. And all this document you have to maintain. Documentation is very important. So that was all about two major components of LIMS. Both are equally important. One is software and the other one is hardware. Also, the bottom line in regulatory affair department, or you can say in a good laboratory practice, is the documentation part. Even if you do a smallest thing into the laboratory, as per the guidelines, you have to prepare a document, and that document should be retained until you have inspection from any external agencies. So please go through this material, and if you have any doubt, feel free to ask me. I will try to solve your question. Thank you very much.